You are listening to Key to the Bridge, brought to you by your friends at Keystone Therapy and Training Services, where we will be sharing human stories, talking about community resources, mental health, and wellness. This is a podcast for everyone. Welcome. Hi, and welcome to Key to the Bridge. I'm Erica Bosque, CEO and Executive Director here at Keystone Therapy and Training Services, and welcome to our amazing podcast. I'm super pumped to be here today with one of my colleagues and friends. Really awesome, amazing human.
You could call me a friend.
Yeah, definitely. I feel that way. With my amazing colleague, Leela, here today. And we are going to be talking about all sorts of things related to families, caregiving, parents, how we're all supposed to do this work in 2025, because things have gotten weird and hard, and also how awesome everything is in a nutshell. And so with that, I'd like to let Miss Leela introduce herself. So Leela, go ahead and say your name and tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're at right now, personally, professionally, how you're doing. Give us a little intro. Let everybody know who you are.
My name is Leela Munson. I'm very happy to be here with Miss Erica and talking about, obviously, the topic that I live, breathe, think about all the time, personally, professionally. I'm a mom. I have 3 boys. I am a family member. I've got my niece and nephew. I got my parents, my husband, my, relationships. In Sonoma County, I'm also a tribal member of the Wendat Nation and of the Dene Nation, but no comments that I make today represent my tribes. They're all my own.
Okay, they're all your comments.
But I think it's
Leela
important
comments.
in these conversations to bring our whole self in. And I think that's where I am in my career. I'm a therapist right now working here at Keystone, which I love. And I just am in a place in my career where I'm trying to figure out how to bring all parts of myself to some type of work that is actually helpful or useful to my community and healing. And not saying that's a destination I've reached, but
yeah, I think you and I will be always working towards.
It's just like it's a good goal.
It's a good
goal.
Yeah,
right.
It's a really good goal. Well, I wanted to have you here today because I feel like you and I have a lot of office kitchen conversations around, because we have an office kitchen here, and Leela and I will get into these kind of shorter spurt conversations about the blending right now of both our professional experiences that we're having with working with families in general, and then also reflecting on our history of professional development and what it's been like coming up in this work, supporting families while having our own personal history. And then all of a sudden it feels like we became parents, like quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird to say 10 years. It's been about 10 years, but it feels quick to now also have these babies that we're raising and doing it in our community, and trying to figure out how we're going to do some things the same and how we're going to do some things different. And what do we do with all of the information and resources we have? So we have a really interesting time of being parents. And so I wanted to share some of Leela's amazingness with all of you, but I also think it's a really important conversation that we're going to need to keep having, because the level of, I would say, work, but also load that is on people who are raising children in whatever role you're in is pretty heavy right now. I don't know if it's ever not been heavy, but I feel like we are realizing what our heavy load now is. I think we're realizing, we're like, oh, this is like real. This is a not joking around load. I think we're really coming into it. And so with that, with our first question, my first question for you, Miss Leela, is, how are things going in the type of work you're doing with families? You've been doing it for a long time. So if there's any kind of reflective thoughts you've been having lately about doing it versus what you're doing now, and how it's going for you, and like what you're noticing generally. We'll start with a general question with the families that we're working with.
Yeah, I mean, how are families doing? Struggling. I think in this particular political moment too, we're really seeing how the communities that we are in are not as strong as we might wish, not as connected. And I think, I think about the families that I work with, and so many of the moms and dads that are coming, feel they're doing it alone. And that to not do it alone is to kind of expose yourself to judgment, because I think it's kind of a thing in all aspects of our life, that social media, but also just the rise of information, like knowing a million different parenting styles. Like, I don't know that my grandmother thought, should I do attachment parenting or should I do this? I think it was more just like, we get through, you water, feed, and they go outside. That's kind of the...
And you love on them, and you kiss them, and hold on to them. But you're right.
When you want to.
When you want
to. There was a big, not like they won't develop attachment. It was like, I love you, so I'm going to love on you.
Right.
I'm mad at you, so I'm going to yell at you. Not to say I'm not giving a better or worse, but I just think that the amount of thinking we're doing about parenting is really high, and that's often happening alone with our computers, not like in community. And so that theme of loneliness and kind of where that leads us to is rough. So I think that's something that with my families that I'm working with, but also, obviously in my own life, my oldest is 12, and at the time when I had him, I was kind of the first in my group to have children. And then now I have a 2-year-old also. And so just kind of the different position I'm in having him as a baby, how established I am, and what type of community I have looks very different. And so I think about it all the time of like how it's affected those little guys.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying about doing it alone and then thinking about it all the time is interesting. Not that you and I get to spend some time with our grandparents and are just elders. And I'm with you. I don't exactly know what they were probably thinking about their kids all the time. But I also think there was an ease to knowing that there was more community. And just even in general, like regardless of your socioeconomic status or like what was going on, like, but that you were a little more tapped into how people were going to raise kids, because you had usually most people had something that they were connected to. Rarely were people like alone. And I think we're with some adults right now raising kids that are alone a lot. Like if like they're not doing it with anyone or knowing how to connect to people who are doing it. And that doesn't not sound good. I just think that it just sounds really hard, really, really hard. And so I'm wondering too, when you're noticing, I'm giggling because you and I talk about it a lot, that if you don't have support for yourself while you're doing it, like what's the plan? Like what's the plan?
Right. Yeah.
Like, what's the plan? And I guess I'm wondering too, what are you noticing the most that I would guess say, how is that loneliness or lack of community showing up in what people are doing for themselves or with the kids they're raising? Does that make sense? My question makes sense? Like, how is it showing up? Because it's one thing to like feel lonely, but you might not be talking about it. So how is it showing up in what people are doing or not doing?
Well, and I'm finding myself kind of like, separating out my answers, but maybe it's better we just kind of pick a lane.
Or not.
Yeah, but I spent a lot of time working with people who are really, economically marginalized, so poor peoples. And those are the people that I, have worked with for most of my career and that I feel most passionate about working with. And so there's like a real like economic hard line that also kind of is isolating for people. Like, it's not that you don't really like value family. It's like, I have to be at work. Like, there's not a huge like option there. And I mean, I was at some point as, single parenting and dropping my kid off while he was asleep and getting home at night while he was asleep. And it felt horrible. That's like, I still feel the pain of those times. And I was like, and I get to take you to your well child checkups on the insurance that I'm paying for.
Right.
And so there's like those realities. And then I think there's, more people who are kind of in that category. I mean, there's there's always been poor people in this country, but you hear a lot about the erosion of a middle class where there's choicefulness around having parents at home, having a neighborhood, someone who can kind of do some of those, what do they call it, community building work that's unpaid, caretaking labor that's about that's kind of going away from more communities with the just kind of economic pressure. And so it looks different though if I think that person is isolated for a very different reason maybe than someone who has the economic opportunity, but they're afraid to talk about their real experience of parenting because their friends on a vacation to Hawaii with their kids and it doesn't look like they ever scream at their 3-year-old. And, so then it's like you kind of force yourself into this bubble. And I mean, I just don't think we should ever be alone with 4-year-olds. They'll tear you up. We need a support person with our 3 and 4-year-olds. Like, I think you warned about the 2-year-olds, but they can't really talk. The 3 and the 4-year-olds.
I'm in full solidarity with that comment. Everybody talks about 2-year-olds, and I'm like, 2-year-olds are still a little easier to pick up. Yeah. Like, physically pick up.
They're kind of babies.
You're still kind of little. 3 and 4, look out, man. I don't know what goes on, but they
will take you out.
They will. You need a support person.
You do.
And that's why they go to preschool for some folks who have the privilege of going to preschool. And every day I drop off my baby at preschool, I want to hug and kiss and love on the people who are there because I'm like, you're doing amazing work. There's like 20 of them here. But I think maybe that's part of it. They're not alone. They have a group of people. They're in solidarity. And I think that's what 3 and 4-year-olds need. They actually don't need adults. I think they just need to
They need like a field... with like sandwiches served on the hour.
Yeah, they'll figure it out.
Yeah, I do think that that's sort of a model it would be.
Mm-hmm. But you're right. You need a support person for different periods of time while you're with kids. And so I want to go back to what you just said, though. The economic part of parenting and caregiving in that way, I agree with you that I do not think we discuss enough what the barriers or obstacles people are up against depending on your socioeconomic status, right? Because what you just said is really important. Families don't necessarily want to be with their kids, but they have to be at work, right? So that their families can hopefully have what they need. And in living in Northern California, and you and I, even as examples, working 2 jobs, right, to still have what we want, to have, I would say, a decent like middle class lifestyle here. I mean, I don't have like tiaras or anything, or like you and I aren't like dripping in jewels or excess. I mean, we're not. I mean, our earrings are great, but we don't have a lot of that. But I just think like what we're doing to like be able to like send our kids to camp and maybe go on a vacation and go out on a date with our husband every once in a while, and like these things that are very middle class in nature but are expensive. And so like how do we afford it? You and I work 2 jobs. And so I think about that piece too, that undiscussed level of work, like jobs that are now required to maintain the lifestyle of living where we live is really, really tough. So to your point, if you don't have necessarily what you and I have, the amount of work that's on people with their kids is real intense. Yeah. Real intense. And so then, when you're showing up to parent and you've maybe worked the night shift and you have 4 hours to sleep before you have to go to work again, you're not going to be doing your best caregiving.
Yeah. I mean, the sleep deprivation probably of all, in all areas is one of the things that with my clients, and I have to remind myself of it's so rampant. And it's because of working what we can work. And night shifts are really appealing to single moms because they can have their kids sleep with grandma while they can then be parenting in the day. But it's like you realize there's 0 sleep in that scenario for you, and that plan's not going to work, but they're making it work.
I don't. The sleep deprivation, rest, like the concept of rest, right? That you need rest when you're doing any form of caregiving, and that rest also to creates an experience with the people that you're around, right? Like if you're rested and they're rested, like that's also unfortunately a privilege for a lot of people to be able to rest. The babies too, like to your point, right? And I can completely relate to dropping your baby off early in the morning and then you pick them up and you're with them for maybe 3 hours, right? If you're lucky. and then everybody's going back to bed, or you're up in the middle of the night, and then you get up and you do it again. And so that type of load for parents, I just think even talking about it is, do you think it's getting better, us talking about it, or about the same, or do you think it's looking different, or it could be all of the above?
I mean, I think for me, there is starting to be in some areas a consciousness of, it was a scam pretending this wasn't work. I mean, it was at one point like a very specific kind of scam that was done to be like everything about caring for kids, caring for elders, caring for a community and a family is all cute. None of it is like real work. Unless, of course, you know, I recently had a client who left, you know, an abusive relationship, and there were 5 people hired to replace the labor that she provided for free in that relationship. And
5.
Yeah, 5. 5 people, because it's, I mean, at some point it is labor. You can't get people for free to do all of those things.
No.
And so I do think there's sort of a way that we are starting to, some of us at least are starting to talk about that. I mean, I think at the same time of that, men and women are both in that position. Like, I know more fathers than ever who are also like, I don't know who I am besides the person that drives my child to visits because I'm just working and parenting. I mean, I don't think it's maybe as gendered as it was before. So maybe that's hopeful for us to have a conversation about just, can we count this somehow in our society, that it's important for us to take care of little people and people who need it? Just anyone who needs it?
Anybody who needs care, can we count?
Can we count doing that as not just like a cute little thing or like a saintly thing? Just like, you know, it's part of what we need to do.
I mean, can we count caregiving? ? Sounds like a good campaign.
Yeah.
It sounds better than a scam. But like, can we count caregiving? Yeah, we've done the scam. Now we want to do, can we count it? Like, can we count it as labor, work? And then it also usually comes from this very deep, connected place of you loving or supporting the people that you're doing it for. So that also has a different kind of giving. It's different. I mean, how you think about what you and I can do in the middle of the night for our kids on week's end. I don't know how I do it. People are like, how do you get up? I'm like, I don't know. My body just does it if that's what needs to be done. But I don't think I could do that for just anyone. Yeah. Right. And so I do think that piece around how are we going to count it versus the cuteness area. And I agree with you. I think about like the early 2000s in particular, especially like 2000, 2010, when parenting got seriously commodified. Like as soon as you could go online and make like an Amazon or like baby shower wish list of some kind, you know exactly what I'm talking about. As soon as, and it got packaged through media.
I'm just imagining the snoo. Like, as soon as
what a snoo is, go ahead and Google it. It's a really interesting.
It's $1,000. I mean,
it is. It's literally $1,000
nanny that.
It's just like rock and hold.
I don't even know. I did not have a snoo.
I did not either.
Maybe I'm jealous.
Maybe we are jealous.
Maybe I needed an adult snoo.
We need an adult snoo. I'm here for that. We should work on that product line.
People pay $1,000 for that.
Maybe they have those, but it's right. Like that is, I think about that. You and I were entering parenthood with our partners during a time where it was like there was a heavy push, not a lot of conversation around what it takes to do what it is that you're doing. Whether, even if it's by choice or not, you're going to do it. And now there's like a packaging of it. And I also think, to your point about social media, I think about the amount of famous people or just rich people in general that were also in the same phase of life and what that was doing to, at least for me, my parenthood development of like what it was supposed to look like or feel like or be like. And that impact, I don't think is super new. I always think we've had media to like show what, the perfect family is supposed to look like. That's not a new idea. But the volume of that content that we are now getting is nuts.
Yeah, I mean, it's really common for, I think, us to just think if there's something, if our baby or our child is not happy, then it's because we haven't found the right product. And I think, I've talked to so many parents who was like, they've tried this new, they've tried the baby, and it's like they're not sleeping. And then you just get pissed. You're like, you're making me look bad, I'm doing all the things. And it's just, it's a really unrealistic view of what a relationship to a tiny human is. There's no, they have the full range of emotions, and you don't have control over that. Only so many, lollipop works only so many times.
It's
and
true.
I've tried.
Yeah, sure.
I've brought it to the max.
Yeah, I brought it to the max.
We parented during the pandemic. So at that point it was like, well, I'm got a 2-hour meeting, so the kids are going to have a bag of cheesy puffs thrown at them. Disney Plus was the babysitter. I mean, there was zero, it should be like this, because there was no relief. I mean, at least for a lot of families. And it's kind of interesting to have a conversation about isolation when it's like we parented in isolation, literal isolation.
For 2 years.
For 2 years. And I think there's still kind of some impacts of that as well, which it's such a funny thing. It kind of becomes a dream, It's like this collective trauma that we've all just sort of like put in a weird way. But there's this way that I didn't get in the play date like schedule. I was completely out of that. And then to restart it, it's not natural. It's not something I've been doing. There's no momentum behind it. So it's been kind of building that back. And I think some of us just are not going to do that. Like, we're used to now parenting in isolation, and it's hard to change, even if it doesn't feel good.
And I think the isolation speaks to the you're making me look bad, because you don't have context of other examples of the exact same thing of what you're seeing, right? That if you are raising kids in community, you see the full spectrum of like what's going on in development. You also see the full spectrum of what's going on with different types of parenting and caregiving styles.
Yeah.
You get to learn from each other. You also get respite, It's interesting. A couple of weekends ago, we were at a park, and Ryan brought a football to the field, and it loves to play, and I love that about him. And 20 minutes later, there are 15 to 20 kids out on the field, and he's organizing a game, and whoever the adults were that were with these kids kind of just they were sitting on the field or on the bench to watch them playing. And we got in a dialogue that there were parents or whoever these adults were with these kids that didn't really know how to play with them. And I was thinking, I'm like, whoa, like not just sure all the mental health provider skills, but like just as a parent and a human, to also, to your point, how are you supported in accessing some of your like memories of knowing about like what it was to be young or small, or how to have fun, or be vulnerable or be connected or whatever, like those pieces too. I think sometimes when you're alone, there are parts of yourself that you forget how to play.
Yeah.
How to use. And so then when your kid it doesn't even have to be your kid, a kid is asking you to access something in yourself that you've maybe forgotten or don't want to get into, you can also get upset at them for that. Because you're like, I don't know how to do that. I don't want to do that. I can't do that. I'm worried about doing that. And so then near the end, Ryan's like, okay, why don't we do a couple downs of like adults versus kids? Mm-hmm. And all the parents or whoever they were, the grown-ups like got up and like we all went to the field, and it took like that collective energy, a little peer pressure too, right? Because you have like 20 kids screaming at you, let's go, all the things. But I just think if you're alone, right, you even go to a park and it's full of people, the adults don't even sometimes remember like how to engage with each other. Like, oh, hey, we're at the park. And I think where some of us are out of practice, or we need to be taught or modeled like how to do it, because we're not accessing each other even in little ways.
Yeah, there's a way that it's beautiful that community doesn't have to be proximity, right?
No.
Like all of us have had moments where like the people around me are not my people, and so the internet has given so much freedom to anyone who's felt that way, to make communities, but there is also something to proximity. Like sometimes it's not the best people, but it's the people you see at the park, and that there's something to that kind of. I think that when you think about community, it's like in an ecosystem, not everything is of equal importance or value, maybe, but everything is kind of connected. You can have the park date mom. It doesn't have to now become like your inner circle and you share every single topic. Like that's a beautiful act of kind of creation you're doing between the two of you, of just like a little bit of proximity community. And then that has values, because when you live near somebody, it's really easy to drop off, I made twice as much spaghetti sauce as I needed. And that's a lovely thing to have. And you don't have to kind of have all your values aligned and have to, share your whole life story to like get to a place where you can like have a cup of coffee or,
be neighbors.
Be neighborly. Yeah. And I think
that's another word that we've got to come back to, is like, what does it mean to be a neighbor? Right? Like I don't know everything about everyone I'm around all the time, but I do know my neighbors, and that's out of doing it. I know that's also more work, but how do you just even get to your point? Not everybody has to be your deepest best friend or family member, but just people in.
And there can be value in a relationship that is just that, like, I'll put your trash cans out for you. And it doesn't have to, like, relationships don't necessarily need to begin on that, like, we're in a chat room specifically curated for people who have all of these, things in their signature in common. Instead, it could be, that was a little dig at academia, but, all these things in common. It's like, sometimes it's just my neighbor needs me to put their trash out because they're, like, kind of struggling, and I can do that easily. And then from there, little things can grow. And I think that's where I'm trying to challenge myself too, because it is inconvenient to create community, and it's a little less glamorous than talking about it, Like, I think we can talk about it a lot without really doing the acts that are so important. And that's sort of a similar parallel to like what we were talking in the beginning, like the caregiving. Most of caregiving is pretty unglamorous. Like, it's a lot of bodily functions, like, and working through those things,
I was thinking about, there is some talk about social media, right? Some memes or photos that go around, right? Around the expectations of what caregiving or parenting or running of a household used to look like, predominantly and still in some ways on women. And I think about that we are like the descendants of a lot of women who had to do this work and never complain about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Never. You did not. You didn't let anybody see how hard it was. And it doesn't mean that, and if I'm going just heteronormative, the father in the picture also had his role that was extremely hard, and he wasn't supposed to talk about it either.
Yeah.
Right? None. And now I feel like we've kind of had the pendulum swing a lot the other way, predominantly through technology, right? Where you also now, too, could go on a doom scroll of the dire challenges and sadness of what people are sharing, which is also just a new place to be. That if you want to look, to your point, like having things curated, right? Like, so if you were, searching, which is probably going to show up on our phones tonight, right? If you're talking about like the stress of parenting, your phone in particular is going to curate all of that content. So then you're also just digesting the doom and the hardness all the time and not accessing any of the joy or the goodness.
It's so interesting how doom becomes like stylized, like
stylized doom.
Yeah. mean, it's better than just the raw dog doom, I guess,
Stylized or raw dog doom.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's true. It's better.
Because I'm thinking, there was a younger mom who I think the generations are smaller now, because so much has
smaller.
changed.
Mm-hmm. Like
And
we're in 2-year cycles right now.
I felt like when I was becoming a mom, there was still a lot of enjoy every moment, like it's so sad.
Quick.
Yeah, like it's so sad that parents don't enjoy it, and then you're just feeling so guilty all the time that you're not just like treasuring everything. Mm-hmm. But she was actually saying the opposite of like it's almost kind of like another trope to just be about how horrible it is, and how that felt very discouraging to her, who just kind of wanted to like enjoy her kid, I guess, and felt like there's definitely hard things, but there's something about that, that it becomes it becomes stylized, or it becomes a certain way that we can talk about things. But I think, we talk about parenting, the pressures on it, and you were bringing up our grandparents, and I was just reminding myself, my grandmother could not own property. My grandmother was not able to have a bank account for most of her life.
Right.
Eventually she was, but when she was parenting, she could be taken to the loony bin if she said, I don't like parenting.
Correct.
And there was no questions asked. It was like, your husband says that, okay, then let's commit her. And so I think it's just like, it's really interesting the moment we're in history, but it's also this ability to have some freedom to talk about things. And like you said, it's heteronormative, but I think that was there's always pockets where that wasn't allowed, or that wasn't necessary. But I think the heteronormativity was what you could present with, and you really had to present something differently you couldn't present that openly.
Oh no.
And their generation. So we are dealing with problems that are from maybe some good things.
Yes.
I mean, maybe we're dealing with problems that are definitely from some good things, some freedoms and some ability to openly talk about.
And new mistakes.
Yeah.
I'm always excited about making a new mistake. It's hard when sometimes you keep making the same mistake over and over again. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, a new one. Cool. Mm. All right. Maybe Maybe we're pivoting, away from making the same stuff over and over again. And I agree with you that piece around what our descendants were able to do versus us. And I'm also wondering, too, about what you were talking about earlier. You and I both have partners who are involved. Mm-hmm. And that also, too, is an interesting place to be, because I feel like Ryan and I are both doing parenting in a way that is generationally new to us.
Yeah. Right?
And that his modeling, right? Like, yes, I was very fortunate being around a huge gaggle of like powerhouse ladies who were predominantly doing the parenting and the caregiving. So I got a lot of role modeling. He had amazing male role models that were around him too, but they weren't doing, speaking of like gender roles, a lot of these gender roles, they weren't doing them. And so I love sometimes he's like, I'm not sure. I just need somebody to like show me, right? Like, or teach me how to do this. And there is also to that even isolation between partners, because there's this piece around like, well, like what you're supposed to do versus like what I'm supposed to do, and the sharing.
Yeah.
And that trust in the sharing, right? That I can remember taking some advice that, having the kiddos and being like, yeah, Ryan isn't going to do it the way I do it. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, he's going to have to find like his own way.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some things we do the same, but a lot of it's probably going to be different because we're different people. And I think about that so early on, even in like going to like the good old changing the diapers. Mm-hmm. Right? The way I changed the diaper and the way Ryan changed the diaper, different approaches. And you know what? Our babies didn't care. They didn't care. They just knew if mommy was doing it, it was going to be like this. And if daddy was doing it, it was going to be like this. And they just figured it out. And I think that, too, also is a different type of isolation when you feel like it has to be done. There's like one way, right? There isn't, or to your point earlier about like, I need my baby to sleep, and we have to figure out like the one way that it's going to work for this to be. So there isn't.
Yeah, we can't do it wrong.
We can't do it wrong, and it has to be the same. Like there's this thing about it being like same, and I'm like, kids don't really care about that.
Right. Well, and I think we really discount in a lot of the kind of parenting advice world, like how kids are, smart little humans. They might be like, one style is maybe more, correct than the other, but they're going to learn how to figure it out. I mean, I think we don't talk about the like big picture, the context. There's a lot of things that matter besides like the language you use with the child. I know I've definitely, in a rage with my kids, used all the right words and just come off as a completely crazy person. They're like, you need a minute, Mom. It's like you can use all the right words and still transmit like I will kill you, and so it's like with our partners. I mean, you said something earlier with like the like making new mistakes. Like none of us not none. Few of us inherited language and communication skills around how to partner in a more like labor equal relationship. That is not like, that's something that the generations now in this country, I mean, just bringing in culture a little bit, obviously colonialism has a lot to do with why in this country we parent the way that we parent and the isolation people feel. But particularly here, this is like new conversations. These are invented things. So you feel that anxiety, and it's like all of like, they're changing the diaper wrong. And it's like, I can't say anything, or I'm just going to be mad about that, but it's not, is it a big deal? It's like, there's all this weight to something like that it's like, because we've had all this weight. I mean, this is not like generations of sharing.
No. Yeah. And culturally speaking too, that also is that this conversation is also happening across cultures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Like you and I are working with people from all kinds of different types of backgrounds, and we're seeing a lot of similar conversations across different backgrounds, which is really interesting around like how it's going to look or how it's going to work itself out might look different. But I do think that there is this piece around how are we going to do it in a way that is taking what we want from what we've learned, and like what are we going to do to make it our own.
Yeah.
And we also are getting back to also trying to treat children with some form of respect.
Oh yeah.
Which is
it's a daily struggle.
It's a daily struggle. I think about it, right? Like this idea that a child, right, is a being that deserves some form of like respect and listening and like tending to, and then you're also supposed to hold the balance of boundaries and teaching and all of those things like all at the same time. And I do understand how seen not heard became the law of the land. Like I see how it happens.
Someone, I can't remember who, someone wise said to me one time, because it was during a conversation where there was people saying, people who with a certain privilege can never understand people without that privilege. And the person said, well, everyone knows what it's like to be a marginalized person because everyone was a child once.
Whoa.
And it just like hit me.
That hit me, you saying me. I just got goosebumps on my skin.
And I'm like, oh, everyone has this trauma. Like that's part of the reason we struggle to see each other, because we all did experience that marginalization as children on some level. And so then I think it makes it, tasty at some point for some of us when you're like, I'm not marginalized anymore. I'm going to go. I'm going to roll with this, Whereas if we had this kind of more holistic view from childhood, maybe we wouldn't, as adults, need to keep playing all this stuff out.
I mean, maybe. You mean back to the good old starting with like attachment theory and like feeling solid and
I think, what did you say? Try to have some respect for children.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it is a daily struggle, right?
It's a daily struggle.
And I feel that with my kids all the time. Like, I want to braid your hair and braid my prayers into your hair, and you're wiggling so much, I'm going to beat you with this brush. And it's the same thought at the same time, and it's like these sweet moments that we build, but we still have all that kind of
Weight
of like, I mean, when we were children, that it was, yeah.
Yeah, you might have gotten knocked with a brush when when you were small.
Yeah, I mean, of course.
Sit still.
Yeah, normal.
Yeah, like just sit still. Yeah. And I think that piece around how you do something differently when you didn't necessarily experience it is where some of the I must be doing it wrong comes from.
Yeah. But it is crazy to be a therapist now and talk to parents every day who are like, I am alone and I am the only one feeling this way. And I know everyone's in a confidential relationship with me, but I am just seeing the need for like, I'm like, can you all just like listen to 5 minutes of each other's session, because you're all in the same exact pain. And you all think you are failing as a parent. You all think you are, the only one whose kid's not sleeping. And maybe it's because you didn't give them something. And it's like, no, kids just don't sleep. They just don't. I mean, or they do, and then you got lucky. But it's not really about you,
Yeah.
And I just wish that we could hear each other say those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. People ask me all the time, they're like, how are you doing with like not sleeping? I said, well, I just got to a place where I really try when I lay down and I close my eyes, I really try to not think about how much of this I'm going to get. Yeah. I'm just going to get whatever I get. Yeah. And if I can lean on my community, I might be able to get some more later.
Yeah. Before the train goes off the rails.
Yeah. You have to tap into your group. But I do think about that also too in terms of sacrifice. Mm. When you were talking about the scam, which is a funny way to think about it.
The fake news.
I do think that is something that definitely gets under discussed, is if you're entering, doesn't matter how you get access to kids, but if you're raising them, caring for them in any way, the sacrifice that you're going to make as the grown-up is highly under discussed. That yes. It is a level of sacrifice. And the worst part about the sacrifice is I can't explain it to you until you're really doing it, right? I don't have some type of magic power to like make you understand the level of sacrifice until you're in it. Yeah. And that's a hard thing to try to quantify or explain to folks before they're getting into it. And I see it with people who maybe didn't like biologically give birth to children, but they are step parenting, or even I think about like youth that I was doing like a babysitting training and they're trying to understand. And I'm like, yep, you're the adult. That means like, you're going to have to figure out, yep, what are you going to do with that baby if you have to go pee, right? You're babysitting the baby, but you got to go to the bathroom. What are you going to do with the baby? And they're like, I don't go pee. I'm like, nope, that probably won't work. Eventually you're going to have to go. So what are we going to do? Right. But like that level of like thought process and sacrifice, regardless, like you're the person in charge. Well, that's not true. Very few people use the word sacrifice when I was considering entering parenthood. That was not a word.
Yeah.
Nobody said that. Like, oh, your old life. And then I'm like, nope, sacrifice. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And if you aren't talking about that, then it can feel like I'm not doing enough or I'm doing it wrong. And it's like, no, you're just making a lot of sacrifices and it's hard to do all of that.
Yeah. Well, and I think like there's some of us, and I mean, this is like, I guess kind of leading up to the theme of this is just like, if you are parenting a kid with special needs, if you are parenting a parent who is no longer your parent and is now your baby because they have dementia, the sacrifice you make has to come from completely inside yourself, because nobody sings you in our society. And I think that's my piece of just, I wish we could sing each other a little bit more, because it's so, it's so good. And it's so good to have our old people taken care of and not in a burning building when the fires come down and nobody's showing up,
Yeah, I mean, those are rough times. Or like what we're going to do right now.
Sonoma County trauma is showing.
Yeah, serious. And at the same time, right, like, yeah, all the bebs that need help.
Yeah.
And we have to sing each other. That is also too, though. Yeah, that would be a beautiful place to be able to be. But we'd probably have to be in a little bit more proximity in some ways to sing each other.
Yeah, we have to play football at the park, you know?
Hey, I'm also down, like, let's go. Maybe that's what me and you need to do is take the show on the road and go around and be like, hey, look at what you're doing there. You're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Or you're doing the best you can, and that's okay too. But, like, no singing.
You might hate this right now, but you're still doing it. I mean, ambivalence is a part of it.
Yep.
You still win.
You still win.
You fed and watered. You fed and watered and put them outside for light.
Oh, God. Okay, yeah. Because I just think that if we don't also, too, just have some, I don't know, normal folk also just talking about it, right? That sometimes it feels, too, that things only get sung for or amplified if the person speaking also has some form of importance.
Yeah.
And that's the other part too, like why we want to keep talking about things is because we need more space for just everyday folk to be able to talk about what they're doing. And I agree with you. So much of what we get to see people do, like having that, I would say, the privilege of being the guest, right, or people invited into people's families and homes, we and you get to see it all the time. We get to see the good, like we get to see it, and that is really powerful. I think it's probably why you and I keep showing up to work, is because a lot of it is really beautiful and awesome, and even when it's hard, it's really beautiful and awesome. So I guess I'm wondering, you're doing all sorts of, you're doing some training and all of those types of things out in the world with work, but how do you think are some ways that we could sing each other or support each other in a better way?
What I've been trying to do, I've had a lot of anxiety spirals, I think, like most of us in these times of like, do I take all my money and put it in my couch? Do I try to figure out citizen? Like, do I just chill? Like, nothing,
do I leave?
Like what is the... Am I being targeted right now? Oh, no, it shifted to Greenland, okay. I guess I'm safe today. It's like we're all in kind of that mode. And I think sometimes being in that mode, I miss really obvious opportunities to be like, like my kids' friends who are trans, like I could text their parent and just be like, giving a lot of love to you. I also have like a great recipe for lasagna making on Saturday. Would you like, like there's those pieces that I could do that are less soothing my own anxiety and imagining, the worst case scenarios over and over again, but are like a little bit more tangible. And then things just kind of grow from there. Like I said, it's like the taking the trash out, or I think just being available to those opportunities to be like, wow, you're really killing it, making a little safe bubble for your kid in this world that's really trying to erase them right now.
And so you thinking, which I feel like it's on repeat, but there is very small, tangible things that have a big impact,
Yeah, we gotta.
Yeah. I have started, when we go to the grocery store with 4 children, anybody else who's in the grocery store that we see with children, it kind of just happened naturally, but like even if
you give them a little salute.
Yeah, we do.
The bluey salute.
Yeah, seriously, a little salute, eye contact, a smile. I've even given some high fives to people because we're all in there, and we're also in there with some adults who are not happy that you're in there with children. They're not excited that we showed up with a brood of kids who know where everything they want in Trader Joe's is, right? And so I do think, too, like that's some of it, going back to the easy community pieces. Sometimes we just got to look around.
Yeah, like it's okay to be where you are. And even if you're like, these people around me in Trader Joe's, I'm not going to be at their house next week. It's just you're giving that openness to like, I do see you.
Yeah.
You exist.
Yeah.
And you're getting groceries for your kids, and it's hard out here for us, like it goes far. We've all been at Trader Joe's and also had people just look at us like, what the fuck's wrong with your kids, Yeah. And then how you leave that interaction, just like, people don't want my kids around. how am I going to get through this, you know?
Yeah.
And then you get mad at them. I mean, hopefully you don't, but like you can. If you're feeling down, you're like, you guys embarrassed me in the store.
Yeah. And all of that complexity, you and I are trying to figure out how we're going to support people. And so my last question for you is there any, not necessarily advice, but resourcing that you're tapping into right now in the community that you think people should know more about?
I mean, I think Medi-Cal right now, for Medi-Cal clients, there's some interesting programming that's happening around mental health and group care. And so I think if you're someone who has Medi-Cal, like calling your insurance and figuring out, like, if you are someone who could use some case management or some housing or some mental health support, or there's more available than people know about. But then I think I'm also just seeing like more people, I think, are becoming open to this. And so if you have a school community or if you have a daycare community, like putting those things out, I think is worth doing. I mean, I think there's a ton of resources in Sonoma County that are specific to each group, but it's almost like so much that it's hard to like figure out what you want to do. And then parents are so exhausted. So it's just like wherever you are, whatever you end up, just do it there, you know. If you end up at the YMCA, just that's your community for a little while, you know, let that be and let it be enough. But no, there's beautiful organizing also happening, I think, in the community for families who are undocumented. And if you are someone who wants to get involved with that, I think there's some really nice places to get involved with that and make sure that we're just on a very baseline protecting our families and our community from, being torn up. And so, yeah, just find your little area, your little niche.
Yeah.
There's and people doing stuff.
There is people. I mean, we're here if you all need us. If you have any questions, we're here. Leela and I are around if you need us. And just, look around. I think sometimes lately, too, we need you to, like, look up from your phone.
Yeah.
And just look around. Because there are people here who want to support you.
Well, there's a lot of people doing groups that people don't show up to because they're, like, afraid or nervous. And it's just go. Just go and be. There's people waiting for you, you know.
There is.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming today and talking to us and the realness. I'm going to be thinking about some of the taglines you said that are going to be great. I'm going to be thinking about the scam tonight. I know I am. That's going to be great. But I really appreciate you coming. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Key to the Bridge, a podcast brought to you by your friends at Keystone Therapy and Training Services. I'm your host, Erica Bosque. Key to the Bridge is recorded and produced by Jeff Henderson and Brian Henderson. This is a podcast for everyone.